Thank you very much. I'm going to start with the latest COVID numbers in Massachusetts as of yesterday. 296 new cases, bringing the total of cases of COVID-19 in Massachusetts to 112,969. There were 10 new deaths recorded yesterday, bringing the total number of deaths in Massachusetts to 8,529. Boston's numbers, which from yesterday as well, 38 new cases, bringing our total in Boston of total COVID cases to 14,609 cases. There were 2 new deaths, bringing our total to 743. And as always, we just want the families that are suffering with COVID, that our thoughts and prayers are with you, and to the families that lost loved ones, we're also thinking of you during these difficult times. We've noticed in Boston in the last few weeks a slight uptick. Positive increase rates went from 2.1% to 2.8%, but the most recent 7-day analysis brings us back down to 2.5%. Similar patterns in daily new cases, the emergency rooms visits are the same way. They're not alarming increases yet, but we are seeing slight increases, which makes us pay very close attention to the numbers on a daily basis. These numbers still remain far below levels we saw during the surge in April and May, and they have not reached a level that would cause us to look at rolling back any of the openings that we've already had here in the city of Boston. It's an uptick, but it's not an established trend, and that's another thing that we watch out for. For people at home that are watching, we look at these trends to see if we have cases increasing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and we're not seeing that. We are monitoring the data very closely, and we're working to understand the uptick and what this activity means. And we're also providing resources to residents to protect them from health and slow the spread of the virus. We continue also to expand testing, and that could be another reason why we're seeing an increase in some of these numbers. Last week we had an average of 1,500, almost 1,600 cases, tests, given in Boston each day. That was up over 10% from the previous week and up over 50% earlier this summer. So we're doing much more testing here in Boston on a daily basis. Our mobile test teams are out in the neighborhoods offering testing to anyone who wants them. The mobile site is currently at Moakley Park in South Boston through this Saturday. You can find, if you want to find out what testing sites are in your neighborhood or where the mobile van will be, you can go to boston.gov/coronavirus. What we need to do now is maintain our focus and recommit our efforts, and that certainly means all of us on a daily basis. Every individual, every business, every sector, every organization here in Boston. Businesses need to continue to follow the reopening guidelines. This has been a tough time for many industries, especially our restaurants, as we all know. But another surge could be devastating to them if we have to pull back on our services. It would be worse for businesses as well. We are committed to supporting our small businesses here in Boston. Any businesses with less than 25 employees can apply for reopening grants. If you haven't done that, please go to boston.gov/reopening funds. That's boston.gov/reopening funds. I also just want to remind people who travel from out of the state you need to comply with the requirements on testing and quarantine. I'm especially concerned also about colleges bringing back students to campus from high-risk states, and that's been a topic of conversation in the press, quite honestly, for the last couple of weeks here. We've asked colleges to share with us their plans for testing and quarantining and safety protocols. We want to see that they're developing a mechanism to implement and enforce these requirements. Many colleges have submitted information to us. We're looking at that information now, and there's still a few outstanding colleges that have not provided us with that information, so we're asking you to please provide us with that information. For individuals, I know that we've been saying this consistently, myself and the governor and almost every person that gets in front of a TV camera, each of us has the ability and the obligation to protect ourselves and help prevent the spread of any potential outbreak. So we're asking people to continue to wash your hands with soap and warm water. We're asking people to keep wearing a face covering outside of your home. We're asking people to keep 6 feet away from other people as much as possible, particularly if those are not family members. And we're asking you to avoid large crowds and large gatherings. The governor rolled back earlier this week a move to reduce gatherings from 100 people down to 50. I certainly support that. In Boston, we already had limited the outdoor events to 50 people since the beginning of Phase 3, and we're still not allowing public or private meetings in city buildings. I also want to ask, last week we had some events, some baseball games at some of our parks in the city, and many of the spectators, the parents or family and friends, weren't wearing masks. We're asking, when you go to a baseball game, a Little League baseball game, you should be wearing the mask. You should be making sure that you're protecting not just the kids that are playing, but also protecting other people around you. So again, a place like that, we'd like to have you have your mask available. If you're sitting away from a large crowd, just have your mask ready to go on if somebody approaches you. I certainly understand as well, because we all do, people wanting to get together. People want to go out. Families want to celebrate milestones. These are human needs, and many people are quite honestly frustrated with where we are in the society today with the coronavirus. But we have to be clear, it's not time right now to let up. This virus is still here and very much present, and that's our reality. We can meet the needs of our social connections in ways that can be safe. If you want to meet people in parks, you meet in small groups, wear a mask. If you want to go to the beach, don't sit in areas where it's crowded. Sit away from people. If you want to go for walks, bike rides, or car rides, that's okay. But again, if you're going to have an interaction with anyone, we're asking you to wear the masks. Make sure you constantly wash your hands. If you go to a restaurant, obviously when you go into a restaurant, you have to have a mask on till you sit down. So we're asking you to be cognizant of that and be respectful of the patrons around you to make sure that as you go out and enjoy yourself, you're also protecting the people around you and you're being protected yourself. We're asking people to continue to check on elderly neighbors and residents and people that are shut in. Just check on them to see if they need anything. And if you approach them, have a mask on, but see how we can help them move forward. You can have fun, but we want you to make sure that we minimize the risks. The bottom line here is that Boston is still doing very well. Compared to much of the United States, we're certainly a lot better than those states. But it wasn't that long ago that we were those states. It wasn't that long ago we were getting hundreds, if not thousands, of new cases a day here in the city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm very proud of the work that's been going on in the city and the way people have been interacting, and I want to thank you for that, and I want to ask you to continue to do that. We know what to do. We've been doing it for a long time now, and it's going to keep allowing us, if we keep doing it, we need to make sure that every decision we make, that we're very cautious about what we do moving forward. I'm going to take a minute to talk a little bit about Boston Public Schools. The most important collective step before us right now, making decisions, is the Boston Public Schools reopening. I know that many people are anxious about the decision. Parents are concerned and also need time to make plans. Teachers have concerns and they're also worried and they need time to make plans. And everyone is rightly concerned about their safety and the safety of our young people. I want to be clear about the priorities that we've laid out here. Keeping everyone safe is our first priority. That means our kids, our families, that means all of our teachers, our staff, that means our community at large. It means, quite honestly, everyone. We will be guided, as I've said from the very beginning, by the science and data as we've been throughout this pandemic. The reason why I start the conversation every time I have a press conference with the numbers is so people understand where we are in the fight against coronavirus. I'm going to continue to do that. We've never held back any information from the public. When we get it out. There's going to be no difference when it comes to schools. We know this year we'll not be starting with all in-person learning in our schools because we know, quite honestly, that it could be dangerous to our families and kids. We will either be starting with a hybrid model or a period of all remote learning. The hybrid model would allow us the ability, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, to have the separation and the protocol and the safety protocol for our kids and our teachers and our staff inside the schools. Whichever route we take in September, we're doing the work now to make sure that both remote learning and in-school learning will be as safe and as effective as they can be. We are working with our school leaders and facility professionals right now to make sure that every school will be safe for a return back to school. We're providing plexiglass and vinyl separators. We've ordered over almost 5,000 pieces of plexiglass. We're providing nurses' rooms with properly ventilated isolation spaces. We're making sure that the HVAC systems are working and have new filters in all of the systems. We're adjusting windows so learning spaces have fresh air. What do I mean by that? Some of our schools, the windows don't open. We're going to make sure that in all the classrooms at least one window can open, and assisting that with ventilation systems in the classrooms. We're buying electrostatic sprayers to disinfect surfaces. Those are those sprayers that you've seen where you spray and it kills the virus instantly. We're buying enough for one for every single school in the district. We're installing sanitizing stations at the entrances of our schools and the exits. So when you walk into the building, you're able to wash your hands or use Purell or hand sanitizer, if you will, and be able to have safe spaces walking into the schools. We're making sure that our foot traffic is properly marked for spacing and safety signage, making sure it's everywhere. Many of you, if you've gone to the doctor right here at City Hall Plaza, going into the building, we have it marked so when you're coming in, people aren't on top of each other. We're doing the same thing in our schools to make sure there's separation in our schools. And every school will receive a certificate of inspection by our Inspectional Services Department before their opening. Just like we did with restaurants, just like we're doing with some businesses in the city of Boston, we're not going to treat our schools any different. It's going to be a top priority to make sure that our inspectors are out there inspecting our schools. We will not send students or teachers or staff into a building that is not safe. Boston Public Schools are also working right now to strengthen remote learning, expanding technology and internet access to make sure that our kids, any gaps that we had when we closed school down back in March, that we fix those gaps, that people don't have them in their homes. We're creating new outreach and supports plans for families. Because if we start all remote, and some of it will be remote, we have to make sure that we get it right. Because my concern right now with school is that we have a growing achievement gap, in particular for our Black and Latino students. And I'm concerned that if we don't have the remote learning or the in-person learning right, that achievement gap is going to continue to grow. We're working on developing solutions for SPED students and English language learners. I know there's a lot of parents out there that are concerned about their kids, and we're working on plans right now about how do we give you the assistance that you need to help you and your family. We're talking with child care providers about the role that they play and much more on how they can assist us and how we move forward. The spring was a crisis response. This fall will be more planned and more supported because we've had the time to sit down and work, and we need to continue to sit down with all of our unions, our teachers, and all of our unions to make sure that a month from now, however we open school, our kids are going to learn at the highest quality. We know that there's going to be remote learning this year. We hope that there'll be in-person learning this year, or at least I hope that there'll be in-person learning this year. We are planning and preparing to make sure that both of them work and it's high quality. We are planning and preparing with the needs of our most vulnerable students in mind. As I talked about, our SPED kids and kids with the education gap, achievement gap. We've invested money this year, $80 million this year in our school system to help close those gaps. It's plans created by Brenda Casillas, our superintendent. We need to make sure that we do everything we can that our kids get high quality education with high quality learning. Our schools have two public health crises right now. We have a COVID pandemic, and we have a crisis of race and equity. We've seen them intersect in the COVID numbers, and we've responded. We've also seen how this equity crisis plays out over many years in our schools. We've watched it. That's why we've increased the budget. with a targeted focus on closing opportunity and achievement gaps. We have to get this right. Our kids are depending on us doing this. So as we think about reopening, all of this is taken into account. For the safety and well-being of our students, we have to start the year with the same focus on equity. Families where adults are working can't always help keep their kids engaged. Students learning English and students with disabilities depend on in-person supports. Children living in shelters need places to go. These are safety issues for many of our children. We have to meet those needs from the first day school begins, or those students will suffer. We can't and we're not going to let that happen. The most fundamental need we have has been serving since COVID arrived is feeding our kids. The work is facing a major challenge right now. The USDA grant waiver to allow summer meals to be served in safe ways, including the grab and go sites and direct delivery students to home. The BPS is feeding tens of thousands of children, and the need to feed them continues. But the waiver is set to expire August 31st. If it's not extended, the Boston Public Schools will have to stop deliveries to students with disabilities and homeless families. The safe grab-and-go setup would have to change. Sites would no longer be open to all children. This would present major logistical changes. We are simply asking the federal government, in the midst of the pandemic, to let us feed our children safely. We started the year with education and affordable housing as our top goals. And certainly, they still remain our top goals, and the pandemic has thrown many curveballs at us. And we continue to move forward on all of this work. Today, I'm announcing that we're making $30 million available for affordable housing. Requests for proposals went out this week, and we'll be awarding projects in September. There's a $4 million set aside for formerly homeless tenants. Winning projects have to demonstrate diversity in the development teams, and they must advance our goals of being a carbon-neutral city. Since construction restarted on June 26th, 26 projects have resumed, with nearly 1,200 affordable homes being built. And this new funding will help us create more affordable homes. I just want to close today by reminding everyone to respond to the 2020 U.S. Census. The Trump administration continues to undermine this constitutional requirement in an effort to undercount people of color, immigrants in cities. This would have disastrous consequences for the city of Boston. The best way to fight back is to sign up for the census now. Go to my2020census.gov, or you can do it by phone. It's quick, it's confidential, and it's safe. To learn more or to help out with outreach efforts, visit Boston Counts 2020's website. As I mentioned, this is very important to the city of Boston. This is how we get fair representation in Congress. It's how we get our fair share of federal investment back into the city of Boston. Everyone counts equally in our democracy, so everyone deserves to be counted and represented. So I'm asking everyone, please fill out the census form if you haven't done it. If you keep putting it off, right now, after this press conference, is a good time to go to my2020census.gov, hop online and fill out the census, or you can call 311 and we can connect you with how you do it. With that, I will turn the floor over to Shaman.
What is your message to parents? To argue to be hybrid or remote? That means a lot of parents can go back to work in the traditional way. What would be your message to them?
Yeah, the question is if schools are remote, in hybrid, I guess, and parents have to go back to work, what is my answer to them? I guess my solution to them. It's complicated. I would love to be all in person 5 days a week. I think many people would, but we know that we can't. We just know that that's not an option today because of the coronavirus. It's still very much front and center here in Boston and Massachusetts and the country. We are going to be working with child care providers, as I mentioned in my remarks, to see what options might be available for them. One way or the other, there's going to be remote learning at home going on. If we do the hopscotch model, it's kids will be in school 2 days of the 5-day week, and then they'll be learning the other 3 days from home. So we're still trying to work through all this. I think it's really important, though, that we'll have to make a decision fairly quickly for parents to have that predictability. I think school opening is roughly a month away. I think today's the 12th. School opening right now is scheduled for the 10th of September. So we have to make some decisions here really soon, and we're basing the data on our school's going to be ready physically, and how do we move forward. Well, I think that a lot of businesses, the question is, the comment was, Boston's the economic engine for the region. What would I say to businesses? Many businesses made a decision back in June and July not to bring their employees back into their offices. Even with the 50% potential capacity, they've made the decision that they're going to stay remote until September, October. I think that all of those decisions now that businesses have to make, including City Hall. I mean, we're open 3 days a week. We're not open people are here, but the whole building's not open 5 days a week. So I think we're all looking at the data to see where we are with the coronavirus. And not to bog you down in numbers, but 3 or 4 weeks ago, the infection rate was 1.9%, then it went to 2.2%, then it went to 2.5%, it went to 2.9%, back down to 2.5%. And it might not seem like a lot, but we're watching it that closely to see how do you make decisions and what can open. I think businesses are paying attention too. So I think right now I'd love to be able to say to you, but just like since March, when I stood at this podium in March, it's unpredictable, and the virus is unpredictable. And we can't. I would love to say that 6 months from now or 3 months from now we're going to be in great shape, but we don't know.
Mayor, there is conflicting evidence on just how easily kids spread the virus.
Yeah.
Say their grandparents, and it's impossible to keep kids apart from all of it. Well, I've seen all these public schools that are reopened and they're packed in. It's hard.
Yeah.
Very hard to keep apart. Is this one of the toughest calls you've had to make, considering we don't know for sure if grandson comes home and spreads the virus to grandparents?
Yeah, thank you. So the question, a comment, and then I'll wrap it in, about what we're seeing around the country, kids getting coronavirus, taking it home to their grandparents, certainly a big concern of all of ours. Is this one of the toughest decisions I had to make? And I'll qualify it in a second. One of the reasons why we're doing the potential hopscotch is that the classroom would be 50% of the kids in the school. Parents have the option to opt out. So I'm going to make an assumption that many parents, a lot of parents, not all, but some parents will opt out. So we're probably talking less than 50% of the kids in the school at a time. This is, no question, one of the hardest decisions that we have to make moving forward. And the reason why I say that is that a lot of our kids in our district, they get fed two meals a day in our schools. As I mentioned earlier, the achievement gap is growing. A lot of our kids get their social activity in after-school programs. A lot of our kids, the opportunities in their life are going to be through education. We made an $80 million investment this year in our education system of new investments because we understood that our kids needed the opportunity to be successful. If we're all remote learning, and we might have to be, we need to make sure that the remote learning side is working, because the achievement gap for our Black and Latino students is going to grow even wider. September 10th, September 17th, I'll use that date, our kids will have been out of a school building for 6 months. I'm not a scientist, but I certainly know that when our kids leave at the end of the summer and come back in the fall, they lose a lot of the knowledge they had in that short time frame. And that's why when teachers start teaching in the beginning of the school year, they kind of refresh the end of the school year to kind of get them up to speed. our kids are 6 months out of a building. So this is a tough decision. And there's a lot of different pieces of this decision. And the safety is the top priority. And the education is the top priority. And the future of our young people are the top priority. So there's no top priority here. Is it the most complicated decision we make? It is right now, because every decision we've made during coronavirus has been difficult. But we have to make sure that we're going to get the decision right. It'll be the right decision for the safety of our students. The long-term implications are, we'll have to see how that works.
Will we have this within a week or two of decision?
I hope so. Again, the question is, would we have a decision within a week or two? I mean, we're watching these numbers very closely. So, for example, if let's assume next Wednesday, I'm standing here, and the rate went down to 1.2%. Well, we might not have a full decision by that point if the numbers continue to go down. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, the question is, some superintendents around the state feel they haven't gotten enough guidance from DESE to make decisions, the most accurate decision. How do I feel about that? I think that, in fairness to DESE, I don't think the federal government, the CDC, has given down good guidance to states across the country on how to open schools. I'll talk for Boston. We're making our decision based on our numbers here in the city. I can't speak for other superintendents. DESE has laid out a plan of some guidelines. They've given us some, not all. Whatever guidelines come down from the state or the federal government, we're going to be more stringent here in Boston. We have been from the very beginning of this. We're going to continue to be. I had a conversation with Secretary Riley last week about this, and the previous question. It's a very complicated issue, and I think that the virus is not consistent. I don't mean to sound like I'm dodging the question. DESE has given us certain guidelines. We're following those guidelines, and in some places we're going to be more stringent in those guidelines. Yeah, I don't have them. I'm going to get them. I just found out yesterday. So I think by the end of the day we'll probably have them all. The plan, basically, in a nutshell, I don't remember all the criteria. They have to have a testing plan. They have to have an isolation plan. They have to have a move-in plan. And they have to have a teaching plan on how they're going to teach. I think those are the 4 guidelines, and we're going to see how that works. Many of our colleges, they've been working on this for a long time. I'm not as concerned about how they're going to follow the students when they're here. My concern is all these students coming from these states, these red states, and I don't mean political red states that are high coronavirus right now, coming in, and if they don't follow the protocol, they're supposed to quarantine for 14 days in their home, wherever they're from. They're supposed to get a test within 72 hours of coming to Boston. And then when they come here, they present us with that test, and then this college is going to quarantine them as well. I just hope that, we're hoping that students do this. We're hoping that students actually quarantine, and they're not bringing the virus to the city.
What do you think about the mass bail fund, bailing out guys?
Yeah, I mean, I share the concerns. I think the Attorney General talked about it today. Everyone talked about it. I mean, I think that if the fund was set up for bailing out protesters, that's one thing, but certainly it didn't. They made a huge mistake. They bailed out a very violent person, and maybe others. I don't know. We're looking at it now. I think that I think it's a disgrace, quite honestly.
Last question. I think my question dovetails with my friend's opening. The opening metrics, do those dovetail with the information that the state apparently sends to the schools, depending on how the city calendars, how it's COVID?
Say it one more time, Karen. Sorry.
Are you aligning your opening plans with the guidance the state apparently sent out to superintendents, depending on how your
Yeah. But the governor did yesterday. The governor rolled out yesterday. It was yesterday, the day before. He rolled out the colored metrics so people can see where they are. We're rolling our plans out, looking at our metrics on a daily basis. I think they pretty much mirror what the state's metric is. So our metrics. We're going to be looking at every day what our increase in testing is, what our increase in positive rate is, what our increase in emergency room visits are. We're looking at all these different metrics. So it's pretty much a similar thing. I looked at the state. The city of Boston is in, I think, in the yellow bracket. We're right under the green, but we're in the yellow, so we can't. I'm not going to say we're not green. So we'll monitoring that, and I think we're going to keep a close eye on that. But we knew where we were before that yesterday. Yeah, I think, honestly, at the end of the day, opening school, I think it's going to come down to the comfort of the superintendents, the mayors and town managers, working with the unions and listening and hearing teachers and staff, listening and hearing parents. Shaman's first question was, there's a lot of people in different places. I've talked to teachers that want to come back to school, and I've talked to teachers that don't want to come back to school. I've talked to school leaders that want to come back to school. I've talked to school leaders that would prefer starting remote. I've talked to parents that are absolutely 100% in favor of starting school in class. I've talked to parents that are like, I'm not going to send my kids. This is a very, very fragile issue. Very understandably. 8,700 people in Massachusetts have lost their life due to COVID-19. And that's in Massachusetts. And so it is a very fragile time. And I think that if we're going to open schools, we, superintendent, the district, has to sell and explain to people why our schools are safe to reopen. That has to be it. Jonathan mentioned about kids gathering. We have to be able to explain how that's not going to happen in our schools. We have to be able to explain all these different things. And that's why for the last month we've been working hard at it, and they're still working at it today. Spent many, many hours in conversations, and they're passionate conversations. Myself and the head of the teachers union, she's my friend. We've had great conversations and passionate conversations. But at the end of the day, we're on the same page. We might have different ways of getting to that, but we have to work through that. We're on the same page. It's about keeping our kids and keeping our teachers and keeping their grandparents safe, quite honestly. So we will get there.
Anything more from the governor or the state? I'm sorry, anything more from the governor or the state? Is there something that you provide?
Yeah, the question is, do we need anything more from the governor of the state? No. The answer is yes and no. I mean, I don't have any list for the governor right now. We spoke about schools today. I mean, we had a 45-minute, not 45-minute, maybe 20-minute conversation about schools. We talked about it, I don't know how many districts are in Massachusetts, but we have 351 cities and towns, so we have 300 and whatever it is districts. Everyone has different opinions, everyone has different concerns, everyone has different priorities. Many of our private schools in Boston, they're going to go back on a hybrid model. It's a little different for a private school to go back on a hybrid model because you're dealing with one school. Some of our charters are going to go back. They're talking about going back. You're dealing with one school with one set of principle, one set of guidelines. When you're talking about Boston, a system like Boston, you're talking about 125 schools. You're talking about different grade configurations. You're talking about kids that have different educational challenges they have to deal with. Families have different challenges. We have to deal with transportation. We have to deal with the MBTA, all of that stuff. So it's more complicated. If we had one school, you could control it a little easier probably. But when you're talking about a system like Boston, it's a big system. 50,000+ kids. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And that's why I know the superintendent has talked to different school leaders about different models potentially. So at the end of the day, if we open in person, it might be different schools might have different rules, but we're working through all that right now.
Finally, what's with the code in English?
I changed the code up because everyone says you look the same. So I put this light. I should take it off. So I wanted to change that because you can't change the building up. So, and I was in the office and, I might have been looking at the Bruins a little bit, so I might be thinking it's wintertime in the playoffs, so I'll just leave it at that.
I thought the AC might be broken on high.
Oh, no, it's working. It's working right now. Anyway, we'll see what happens. It has broken in the past, though. Thank you.